Good morning. Please be seated as the ceremony will begin momentarily. We ask that everyone silence all mobile devices. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United States Department of Defense, we welcome you to our annual observance ceremony where we honor and remember the 184 lives lost 21 years ago on American Airlines Flight 77 and at the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. Please stand for the arrival of the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Joseph R. Biden, accompanied by the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd J. Austin III, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark A. Milley, and Colonel James J. Foster, Command Chaplain, Military District of Washington. Please remain standing for the national anthem, performed by the President's own United States Marine Band, directed by Colonel Jason K. Petty, and the Joint Armed Forces Chorus, directed by Lieutenant Colonel Randall Patel. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Dr. Paul W. Ambrose. Specialist Craig S. Admonson, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Melissa Rose Barnes, United States Navy. Master Sergeant Max J. Belkey, United States Army, retired. Dr. Yenino Betrue. Petty Officer 2nd Class Chris Romero Bishundat, United States Navy. Carrie R. Blackburn. Colonel Canfield D. Boone, United States Army. Mary Jane Booth. Donna M. Bowen. Alan P. Boyle. Bernard C. Brown II. Petty Officer 3rd Class Christopher L. Burford, United States Navy. Captain Charles F. Burlingame III, United States Navy Reserve, retired. Petty Officer 3rd Class Daniel M. Caballero, United States Navy. Sergeant 1st Class Jose O. Calderon Olmedo, United States Army. Suzanne M. Calley. Angeline C. Carter. Sharon A. Carver. William E. Caswell. Sergeant 1st Class John J. Chada, United States Army, retired. Rosa Maria Chapa. David M. Charleboy. Sarah M. Clark. Julian T. Cooper. Asia S. Cottom. Lieutenant Commander Eric A. Cranford, United States Navy. Ada M. Davis. James D. DeBonnier. Captain Gerald F. DeConto, United States Navy. Rodney Dickens. Lieutenant Colonel Jerry D. Dickerson, United States Army. Eddie A. Dillard. Petty Officer 1st Class Johnny Doctor, Jr., United States Navy. Captain Robert E. Dolan, Jr., United States Navy. Commander William H. Donovan, United States Navy. Lieutenant Commander Charles A. Draws, III, United States Navy, retired. Commander Patrick Dunn, United States Navy. Petty Officer 1st Class Edward T. Earhart, United States Navy. Barbara G. Edwards. Lieutenant Commander Robert R. Elseth, United States Navy Reserve. Charles S. Falkenberg and his wife, Leslie A. Whittington, and their 2 children, Dana Falkenberg and Zoe Falkenberg. Petty Officer, 3rd Class, Jamie L. Fallon, United States Navy.
J. Joseph Ferguson. Amelia V. Fields. Gerald P. Fisher. Darlene E. Flagg. And her husband, Rear Admiral Wilson F. Flagg, United States Navy Reserve, retired. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Matthew M. Flacco, United States Navy. Sandra N. Foster. First Lieutenant Richard P. Gabriel, United States Marine Corps, retired. Captain Lawrence D. Getzfred, United States Navy. Cortez Gee. Brenda C. Gibson. Colonel Ronald F. Galinsky, United States Army, retired. Ian J. Gray. Diane Hale McKinsey. Stanley R. Hall. Carolyn B. Hallman. Michelle M. Heidenberger. Sheila M.S. Hine. Petty Officer, 1st Class, Ronald J. Hemingway, United States Navy. Major Wallace Cole Hogan, Jr., United States Army. Staff Sergeant Jimmy I. Holly, United States Army, retired. Angela M. Houts. Brady K. Howell. Peggy M. Hurt. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen N. Hyland, Jr., United States Army. Lieutenant Colonel Robert J. Heimel, United States Air Force, retired. Sergeant Major Lacey B. Ivory, United States Army. Brian C. Jack. Stephen D. Jacoby. Lieutenant Colonel Dennis M. Johnson, United States Army. Judith L. Jones. Ann C. Judge. Brenda Kegler. Chandler R. Keller. Yvonne E. Kennedy. Norma Cruz Khan. Karen Ann Kincaid. Lieutenant Michael S. Lamanna, United States Navy. David W. Lachek. Dong Chul Lee. Jennifer Lewis. And her husband, Kenneth E. Lewis. Samantha L. Lightborn Allen. Major Stephen V. Long, United States Army. James T. Lynch, Jr. Terrence M. Lynch.
Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Nahamon Lyons IV, United States Navy. Shelley A. Marshall. Teresa M. Martin. Ada L. Mason Acker. Lieutenant Colonel Dean E. Matson, United States Army. Lieutenant General Timothy J. Maud, United States Army. Robert J. Maxwell. Renee A. May. Molly L. McKenzie. Dora Marie Menchaca. Patricia E. Mickley. Major Ronald D. Millam, United States Army. Gerard P. Moran, Jr. Odessa V. Morris. Petty Officer, 1st Class, Brian A. Moss, United States Navy. Teddington H. Moy. Lieutenant Commander Patrick J. Murphy, United States Navy Reserve. Christopher C. Newton. Kang Nok Win. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Michael A. Knoweth, United States Navy. Barbara K. Olson. Ruben S. Ornado. Diana B. Padro. Lieutenant Jonas M. Panic, United States Navy Reserve. Major Clifford L. Patterson, Jr., United States Army. Robert Penninger. Robert R. Plosier III. And his wife, Zandra F. Plosier. Lieutenant Darren H. Pontel, United States Navy Reserve. Scott Powell. Captain Jack D. Punches, United States Navy, retired. Petty Officer First Class Joseph J. Piceer, Jr., United States Navy. Lisa J. Rains. Deborah A. Ramser. Rhonda Sue Rasmussen. Petty Officer First Class Marcia D. Ratchford, United States Navy. Martha M. Reski. Todd H. Rubin. Cecilia E. Lawson Richard. Edward V. Rowenhorst. Judy Rowlett. Sergeant Major Robert E. Russell, United States Army, retired. Chief Warrant Officer William R. Ruth, United States Army Reserve. Charles E. Sabin, Sr. Marjorie C. Salamoni. John P. Sammartino.
Colonel David M. Scales, United States Army. Commander Robert A. Schlegel, United States Navy. Janice M. Scott. Lieutenant Colonel Michael L. Selves, United States Army, retired. Marianne H. Serva. Commander Dan F. Shanower, United States Navy. Antoinette M. Sherman. Diane M. Simmons. And her husband, George W. Simmons. Donald D. Simmons. Cheryl D. Sincock. Chief Greg H. Smallwood, United States Navy. Lieutenant Colonel Gary F. Smith, United States Army, retired. Mary Ray Sopper. Robert Spiesman. Patricia J. Stotts. Edna L. Stevens. Norma Lang Sturley. Sergeant Major Larry L. Strickland, United States Army. Hilda E. Taylor. Lieutenant Colonel Kip P. Taylor, United States Army. Leonard E. Taylor. Sandra C. Taylor. Sandra D. Teague. Lieutenant Carl W. Tepe, United States Army, retired. Sergeant Tamara C. Thurman, United States Army. Lieutenant Commander Otis V. Tolbert, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Willie Q. Troy, United States Army, retired. Lieutenant Commander Ronald J. Vach, United States Navy Reserve. Lieutenant Colonel Karen J. Wagner, United States Army. Meta L. Fuller Waller. Specialist Chin Sun Pak Wells, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Maudlin A. White, United States Army. Sandra L. White. Ernest M. Wilshire. Lieutenant Commander David L. Williams, United States Navy. Major Dwayne Williams, United States Army. Chief Marvin Roger Woods, United States Navy, retired. Captain John D. Yamnicki, Sr., United States Navy, retired. Vicky Yancey. Petty Officer 2nd Class Kevin W. Yoakum, United States Navy. Chief Donald M. Young, United States Navy. Edmund G. Young, Jr. Lisa L. Young. Shuin Young. And her husband, Yu Guang Zheng.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now
Amazing grace, amazing grace, amazing grace, amazing grace, amazing grace, how sweet the sound, precious did that grace amazing grace, amazing grace, how sweet. My Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. Amazing grace, amazing grace.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the invocation.
I invite you to pray with me on this solemn occasion. Almighty God, we thank you for your love and your grace. Thank you for being here with us today. In your mighty name, amen. Ladies and gentlemen, I now invite you to enjoy a moment of silence with us as we remember our fallen 21 years ago today in this very place at 0937.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. It is my pleasure to introduce General Mark A. Milley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Mr. President, Secretary Austin, distinguished guests, and especially the survivors and families of the fallen who are here today and watching from around the world. Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this morning's ceremony. 21 years ago today, terrorists murdered 2,977 innocent men, women, and children in the name of their warped ideology. What started out as a normal day here at the Pentagon violently changed at 0937 hours. On the sacred ground where we now stand, 184 Americans were viciously slaughtered, 125 in the Pentagon and 59 passengers and crew on Flight 77. The innocent ranged in age from 3 to 71 years old. The families of those killed and our entire nation will forever remember the pain of this day. It was not just an attack on the passengers and crew aboard the aircraft, not just an attack on New York City or Washington, D.C. or Somerset County, Pennsylvania. It was an attack on our nation as a whole. It was an attack on the freedom of this nation, an attack on who we are and what we represent. The terrorists believed that they could destroy us, destroy our values, the values that bind this nation. And they were wrong. Terror will never destroy us. They will never destroy the idea that is America. The idea that we are all Americans, regardless of where we came from, what our last name is, regardless of the color of our skin or the religion we follow. It doesn't matter if we're male or female. None of that matters. We are all Americans. And it was an attack on all of us. It was an attack because we were born free and equal. And that freedom is worth fighting for. Since 9/11, that is exactly what 3 million of us did who wore the cloth of our nation. We deployed to engage the enemies of our country, to protect and defend the principles that came under attack this day 21 years ago. Each of you Each of you sacrificed to defend our country and its values. Each of you did your duty. Each of you deserves our nation's eternal gratitude. And on this day, we gather here to honor the fallen of 9/11, to remember and reflect and to reaffirm our resolve to support and defend the idea and the reality that is America, for which those brave souls gave their last full measure of devotion. Hate and terror can damage, but it will never destroy the strength of America. The ideas that are our very foundation and the values that are the pillars of this great nation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to introduce the Secretary of Defense of the United States, the Honorable Lloyd J. Austin III.
Well, thank you, General Milley. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here. It is indeed an honor to be joined by family members of the fallen, survivors, and first responders. To those whose loved ones were so cruelly taken from them on September 11, 2001, I offer my deepest condolences. And so does the entire Department of Defense. We know that these moments of tribute are not easy. And we know the resilience that you have shown over these long years. It gives us all strength. So thank you. Today we stand together to remember a day of horror and loss. A day when Al-Qaeda terrorists murdered 2,977 innocent souls, including 184 people here at the Pentagon. But we also remember a day of monumental courage and compassion. A day when people responded to evil and fanaticism with goodness and generosity. A day that called forth the heroism that dwells in the hearts of Americans across this land. Many of those acts of bravery happened right here where we're standing. Our colleagues at the Pentagon risked their own safety to rescue their teammates. They moved rubble with their bare hands. They cleaned wounds with bottled water. They used damp t-shirts as face masks to shield against the smoke so that they could keep on helping just a little longer. You know, one woman was crawling across the second floor trying to escape when she came across a coworker who had been in the same conference room when the plane hit. And the coworker did not think that she could keep on going. Just get on my back, the woman said, and I will carry you. And she did. And she got them both to safety. Just get on my back, and I will carry you. Now that is the spirit of the people of this building and all those who responded at the scene. In the face of cruelty, they showed compassion, courage, and common purpose. In the days and months after the attack, ordinary Americans volunteered in an extraordinary way to help however they could, including millions who raised their hands to serve in the U.S. military. So today I want to again thank our men and women in uniform, as well as the families who make their service possible. Your sacrifice has ensured that America always stands ready to defend our values, our freedoms, and our citizens. Just over 1 year ago, America's war in Afghanistan came to an end. Yet we continue our relentless focus on combating terrorist threats to our nation. And earlier this summer, the United States delivered justice to Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of al-Qaeda. So make no mistake, America's determination to keep our country safe will never waver. And neither will America's determination to bring justice to those who attack our citizens. Surrounding us today are 184 steel benches, each bearing the name of a person murdered in the attack on the Pentagon. And every night, 184 lights come on, lighting up each bench, just as the people who they honor lit up the lives of those who love them. And those lights remind us that even on our darkest days, the American spirit still shines. It shines through the bravery of our first responders. It shines through the strength of the heartbroken. And it shines through the valor of our troops. And it shines through the sacrifice of all those who step up to defend the United States. So today, let us renew our dedication to facing the test of tomorrow as our heroes did, with compassion for one another, with love for our great republic, and with devotion to our democracy. We will always remember. We will always stand guard over this democracy, and we will always seek to be worthy of those who we lost. As President Biden has said, and I quote, "From the deepest depths of our worst crises, we've always risen to our higher heights." And ladies and gentlemen, our president deeply cares about the men and women of the United States military. And our president believes deeply in America's strength, in the democratic values that guide us in times of trial, and in the resilience of the American spirit, even at moments of great challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce the President of the United States.
Secretary Austin, General Milley, to all the families and loved ones who still feel the ache of that missing piece of your soul, I'm honored to be here with you once more to share this solemn rite of remembrance and reflect on all that was lost in the fire and ash on that terrible September morning, and all that we found in ourselves to respond. 21 years ago, 21 years, and we still kept our promise, never forget. We'll keep the memory of all those precious lives stolen from us. 2,977 at Ground Zero in New York and Shanksville, where my wife is speaking now, in Pennsylvania. 184 of them here at the Pentagon. And I know for all those of you who've lost someone, 21 years is both a lifetime and no time at all. It's good to remember. These memories help us heal, but they can also open up the hurt and take us back to that moment when the grief was so raw. You think of everything they could have done if they had lived and just had a little more time. The experience you missed together, the dreams they never got to fulfill or realize. I remember a message sent to the American people from Queen Elizabeth. It was on September 11. her ambassador read a prayer of service at St. Thomas Church in New York, where she poignantly reminded us, quote, "Grief is the price we pay for love." Grief is the price we pay for love. Many of us experienced that grief, and you've all experienced it. And on this day, when the price feels so great, Jill and I are holding all of you close to our hearts. Terror struck us in that brilliant blue morning. The air filled with smoke, and then came the sirens and the stories. Stories of those we lost, stories of the incredible heroism from that terrible day. The American story itself changed that day. But what we did change, what we will not change, what we cannot change, never will, is the character of this nation that the terrorists thought they could wound. And what is that character? The character of sacrifice and love, of generosity and grace, of strength and resilience. In the crucible of 9/11, in the days and months that followed, we saw what stuff Americans are made of. Think of all of your loved ones, particularly those on that flight, ordinary citizens who said, "We will not let this stand," risked and lost their lives so even more people would not die. We saw in the police officers and firefighters who stood on the pile on Ground Zero for months amid that twisted steel and broken concrete slabs, breathing the toxins and ash that would damage their health, refusing to stop the search through the destruction. They never stopped and would not. We learned about the extraordinary courage and resolve, as I said, of the passengers on board Flight 93, who understood that they were living the open, they were there in the middle of the open shot of a new war, and who chose to fight back, not professionals, fight back, sacrificing themselves, refusing to let their plane be used as a weapon against even more innocents. And here at the Pentagon, which was both the scene of the horrific terrorist attack and the command center for our response to defend and protect the American people, so many heroes were made here. So many of your loved ones were those heroes. Began almost immediately with civilians and service members leaping to action as the walls collapsed and the roof began to crumble. They raced into the breach between the 4th and 5th corridors. The impact created by the fire raged at twice the height of this building. I remember I was a U.S. Senator walking up to my office, and I could see the smoke and flames. They were heroes. They went back into those soaring flames to try to save their teammates. Firefighters battled the blaze of jet fuel long into the night, pushing past the bounds of exhaustion. Pentagon staff showed up to work on September 12th, more determined than ever to keep their country secure. As I said when I was up on 9/11, we will follow them to the gates of hell to be sure that they're not able to continue. And millions of young men and women from across the nation responded to 9/11 attacks with courage and resolve, signing up to defend our Constitution and joining the greatest fighting force in the history of the world. And in the years since 9/11, hundreds of thousands of American troops have served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so many other places around the world to deny terrorists a safe haven and to protect the American people. And to all our service members and their families, our veterans, our Gold Star families, all the survivors and caregivers and loved ones who've sacrificed so much for our nation, we owe you. We owe you an incredible debt. A debt that can never be repaid, but will never fail to meet the sacred obligation to you to properly prepare and equip those that we send into harm's way and care for those and their families when they come home. And to never, ever, ever forget, through all that has changed over the last 21 years, the enduring resolve of the American people to defend ourselves against those who seek us harm and deliver justice to those responsible for the attacks against our people has never once faltered. It took 10 years to hunt down and kill Osama bin Laden, but we did. And this summer, I authorized a successful strike on Zawahiri, the man who bin Laden was his deputy at 9/11, who was the leader of al-Qaeda, because we will not rest. We'll never forget. We'll never give up. And now Zawahiri can never again threaten the American people in 20 years after Afghanistan is over. But our commitment to preventing another attack in the United States is without end. Our intelligence, defense, and counterterrorism professionals in the building behind me and across the government continue their vigilance against terrorist threats that has evolved and spread to new regions of the world. We'll continue to monitor and disrupt those terrorist activities wherever we find them, wherever they exist, and we'll never hesitate to do what's necessary to defend the American people. What was destroyed, we have repaired. What was threatened, we fortified. What was attacked, the indomitable spirit has never, ever wavered. We raised monuments and memorials to the citizens whose blood sacrificed on these grounds and in Shanksville and Ground Zero to keep touch with the memory, keep it bright for all the decades to come. When future generations come here to sit in the shade of the maple trees that shelter the memorial, grown tall and strong with passing years, they will find the names of patriots. They will feel the connection that will come to pass on September 11, 2001, and how our country was forever changed. And I hope they will think about all those heroes that were more than the hours and days and years that followed. Ordinary Americans responding in extraordinary and unexpected ways. I hope we'll remember that in the midst of these dark days, we dug deep, we cared for each other, and we came together. You know, we regained the light by reaching out to one another and finding something all too rare, a true sense of national unity. To me, that's the greatest lesson of September 11. Not that we will never again face a setback, but that in the moment of great unity, we also had to face down the worst impulses, fear, violence, recrimination directed against Muslim Americans, as well as Americans of Middle Eastern and South Asian heritage. It's that for all our flaws and disagreements, in the push and pull of all that makes us human, there is a nation that cannot accomplish. There's nothing this nation cannot accomplish when we stand together and defend with all our hearts that which makes us unique in the world, our democracy. We're not only a nation based on principles, but we are based on an idea, unlike we're the most unique nation in the world, an idea that everyone is created equal and should be treated equally throughout their lives. We don't always live up to it, but we've never walked away from it. That's what makes us strong. That's what makes us who we are. And that's what those hijackers most hoped to destroy when they targeted our buildings and our people. They failed. No terrorist could touch the wellspring of American power. And it falls to us to keep it safe on behalf of all those we lost 21 years ago, on behalf of all those who have given their whole souls to the cause of this nation every day since. That's a job for all of us. It's not enough to gather and remember each September 11th those we lost more than 2 decades ago, because on this day, it is not about the past, it's about the future. We have an obligation, a duty, a responsibility to defend, preserve, and protect our democracy. The very democracy that guarantees the rights of freedom that those terrorists on 9/11 sought to bury in the burning fire and smoke and ash. And that takes a commitment on the part of all of us. Dedication, hard work, every day. For always remember, the American democracy depends on the habits of the heart of we the people. That's how our Constitution says, we the people. And the habits of heart of we the people. It's not enough to stand up for democracy once a year or every now and then. It's something we have to do every single day. So this is a day not only to remember, but a day of renewal and resolve for each and every American. And our devotion to this country, to the principles it embodies, to our democracy. That is who we owe those who remember today. That is what we owe one another. And that is what we owe future generations of Americans to come. I have no doubt we will do this. We will meet this significant responsibility. We'll secure our democracy together as one America, the United States of America. That's who we are. That's who your loved ones were and why they gave so much. Thank you. May God bless you all. And may God honor the members of the military we lost and all those we lost here on 9/11. May God protect our troops.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the singing of God Bless America.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in a solemn
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Can we pray together?
before we leave? Almighty and sovereign God, I do believe that America is a beautiful place. And God, that you are here with us. You shower down not just rain from heaven above, but you shower down upon us love, mercy, forgiveness, and that amazing grace that we sing about. Now, as we exchange this hallowed ground, this place, for the road ahead and all that life brings our way, God, provide peace for those who grieve the loss of someone close, of someone dear to their heart. Help us all to walk worthy of your presence and your protection, of the very blessings for which we ask once again today. For you know our hearts and our desire, our hope that we can all live in peace. God, be with our service members and all of our civil servants. Protect them, especially as they stand with courage and determination in harm's way around the globe. And give us peace that only comes from you. In your holy name and in the power of your Holy Spirit, I pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Thank you for joining us this morning. The memorial, the Pentagon Memorial Chapel, and the Navy Reflection Room are open until 12 p.m.
Embrace and comfort all those gathered here today to mourn and remember a spouse, a parent, a child, a sibling, a family member, or a friend. We read the following in the last 5 verses of Psalm 90. Relent, O God, how long must we suffer? Have compassion upon your servants. Grant us your love in the morning, that we may sing in gladness all our days. Match days of sorrow with days of joy, equal to the years we have suffered. Then your servants will see your power. Their children will know your glory. May the Lord our God show us compassion and establish the work of our hands. May the work of our hands be firmly established. I now offer the memorial prayer found in the Jewish liturgy. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the souls of all our beloved who have gone to their eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved ones find perfect peace in your tender embrace, their memory enduring as inspiration for commitment to their ideals and integrity in our lives. May their souls thus be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Myers. Beautiful, inspiring words. We are proud to be joined by members of 3 congregations which were attacked at the Tree of Life Synagogue on October 27th, 2018. Representing the Tree of Life, Dor Hadash, and New Light congregations, they share our need to heal and to remember. Thank you all for being with us. Once again, our sincere appreciation to Maria Cordish, our family readers, and finally, the bell ringers, Patricia Kaufman and John McGuire. Local residents calling themselves ambassadors volunteered to watch over this site and welcome visitors long before this national memorial was established. This year, in January, we marked the 20th anniversary of that group. I would like to thank everyone who has served as a Flight 93 ambassador, including all who could not join us this morning, and all of those who have passed away. You are, truly are, in many ways, the heart and soul of this special place. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please join me in recognizing this dedicated group of people. I ask all the ambassadors here with us this morning to please stand and to be recognized. Thank you. Our next speaker, Ginny Barnett, volunteered for several weeks with the Red Cross National Disaster Response Operations here in Shanksville and in New York after September 11th. She has served as an ambassador since 2006, worked on the group's training and interpretive efforts, and now delivers weekly talks at our Memorial Plaza. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Ginny Barnett.
I am but one of 45 volunteer ambassadors that have the tremendous honor and privilege of sharing the story of the heroes of Flight 93 with visitors. Each of us has our own unique connection with that day and this memorial. For me, it's been all about God's healing me of all that I saw and did post 9/11 through this memorial process. I first saw the crater as a Red Cross volunteer on September 12th, 2001. I immediately began to break down and cry, thinking of the people aboard and what they must have experienced. I realized at that point I could not think about that and still function or get the work done. It was the same when I saw Ground Zero in New York City. So I made a very intentional decision not to think about anything on a personal level of those aboard. I kept all emotions at arm's length. Instead, I focused on the goodness that I witnessed in response to that day, goodness shown in action. Cards, letters, prayers, banners came from across the nation, words of love and support. Donations of funds, materials, and services were enormous. One example, I met with a small printing company one morning to develop the memorial bulletins for the services. They then printed, cut, and folded 1,000 sets of bulletins and wallet cards for services held the next day. They repeated this for the second service, all at no charge. Volunteerism soared in response. In Red Cross alone, as of March 2002, 6,500 workers had served on the 9/11 responses, over 90% of which were volunteers. Over 70 federal, state, and local agencies were here. Side by side, they worked seamlessly and tirelessly, united under the common goal of investigation, recovery. The surrounding community opened their hearts and homes to the families and the response workers, continuing even to this day. Many of the families now consider this local community extended family. Each need during the response seemed to be met almost immediately through joint efforts of the response team and community at large. For instance, the one-way dirt road to the memorial site had become muddy and rutted from high traffic and rains. Tour buses bringing the families would not be able to navigate those roads. I left at the end of one day to find the next morning 12 inches thick asphalt covering all of those dirt roads. I can only imagine the teamwork and unity that such a feat required. But focusing on the goodness in response to 9/11 still left the personal tragedies of that day unaddressed in me. By 2006, I was still keeping that aspect of the 40 at arm's length. Mere mention of 9/11, verbally or in print, caused me to weep and shut down. My oral history for the archives here, followed by volunteering, was the first I started to revisit that day. God brought me to this memorial process to heal. Each task, project, committee involvement were orchestrated by God to take me step by step deeper into the story and the lives of the 40. As I witnessed this memorial actually become reality, I was gradually being able to face the reality of that day. And I discovered that here, the heroes of Flight 93 were the very first to demonstrate their goodness in action in the skies just above us. They epitomized and exemplified the goodness within us. Their courage, bravery, unity, selfless actions, all in the face of tremendous evil and adversity, that is the very definition of heroism. They provide for us inspiration, motivation, and hope for the future. You know, I started by blocking out anything personal about the 40. I just couldn't handle it at the time. I cannot tell you the depth of the honor it is to now know and share their story and who they were. This memorial offers the same healing and hope for all who come here and for our nation as a whole, so that we will never forget for generations to come. I have seen firsthand the evil that man can do, but I have also seen the good that man can do. While we need to understand and not underestimate such evil, it must be balanced with the good that is also within us. Evil may have dominated that day, but it cannot dominate us. With God's help, we can focus on and foster good, rather than let hate and anger consume us. I am forever changed and scarred by 9/11. But now, I have hope for the future. For me, it only happened through God's grace, the actions of these heroes, and this memorial. So I leave you with God's guidance from Romans 12:21, modeled so well for us by the heroes we honor and remember this day. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ginny, for sharing your perspective and what you have gained through the years and your long commitment to both Flight 93 as well as to our nation and honoring the 40 passengers and crew members. Beautifully done. On October 13th, 2021, President Biden signed an act designating the September 11th National Trail Route. This route will form an unbroken trail linking the 3 attack sites of the September 11th, 2001 attacks, and it will pay tribute to the victims and to the heroes of September 11th. We are joined today by several members of the September 11th National Memorial Trail Alliance, which has led the effort to make this trail a reality. On behalf of the entire Flight 93 partnership, thank you for joining us today. A common thread of heroism running through each of the 3 attack sites on September 11th was the devotion to duty shown by law enforcement officers, firefighters, and first responders. They made the nation proud then, and they continue to make us proud now. Thank you so very much, as we are all truly grateful for your service. On September 11th, air traffic controllers, flight attendants, and pilots responded to the crisis with incredible courage and professionalism. Their dedicated efforts allowed thousands of planes to land safely on very short notice across the country and beyond. We are grateful to be joined by more than 50 flight attendants and pilots this morning. Thank you all for what you do each and every day to ensure public safety. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please join me with a round of applause for all of those in the aviation, our pilots, and flight attendants this morning. As one generation recedes from view, the next one takes up its burdens and duties. Today, 21 years ago after September 11th, is indeed a transitional moment. A new generation, for whom the events of that day are not lived memory, is entering adulthood. Our next speaker, Connie Hasany, is a member of that next generation. For 21 years, family members have been guiding partners in our mission to honor the 40. The nation is grateful, truly grateful, for their efforts and those of many others here today in the roles in making this a world-class memorial. Today, Connie speaks to us with the voice of that new generation of family members, one that will carry on the legacy of their cherished loved ones. Connie is the great niece of Patricia Cushing, one of the passengers aboard Flight 93. Raised near Baltimore, she served in the reforestation event earlier this year and plans to be actively involved with the memorial in the future. This year's reforestation, sponsored by the Friends of Flight 93, saw the memorial complete a decade-long effort to plant 150,000 seedlings, each done by volunteer hands with the support of local businesses and governments at all levels. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Connie Hasany.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I am Connie Hasany, and my great Aunt Pat, Patricia Cushing, was one of the heroes of Flight 93. I'd like to start off by saying I'm extremely honored and humbled to be chosen to speak for the families at today's remembrance. On that fateful day, my aunt was traveling with her dear friend and sister-in-law, Jane Folger, to San Francisco for vacation. Although I do not remember much of my Aunt Pat, I have heard many stories about her. She frequently stayed at our house in Maryland to be closer to her mother in a Baltimore nursing home. I know that the last time I saw her was about a month before for my second birthday party. I will always cherish the few pictures that I have of her and me together. While you don't see me, her picture at the entrance to this memorial is my favorite picture with my aunt. In that picture, she was holding me shortly after I was born. When I was a preschooler, I would tell my parents to look above our house because I could see my late grandmother and my Aunt Pat watching over us. To say that my parents were shocked at what I was saying is an understatement. They couldn't see them, but day after day, my telling them to look changed their minds. Although I was only 2 years old at the time of the 9/11 attacks, I have a very special connection, and I hold a responsibility that many others do not. As I have told my aunt's story over the years, I have heard many comments or remarks that made me realize how important my role is in retelling the events of that day. When I was little, I would share with my classmates that my Aunt Pat was on one of the 9/11 planes, and they would ask, "Is she okay?" As I got older, people would comment that they only knew about the 2 planes that hit the towers. And more recently, I have even heard someone say, "I didn't even realize that there were passengers on those planes." I say the same thing every time. There were 3 sites that day: the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and Flight 93, my hero's flight. My generation does not remember the day of September 11, 2001. We were taught little pieces in school and heard little bits on the news once a year. Because of my connection to Flight 93, I am more aware of what happened that day and feel I have a huge responsibility being part of the younger generation that has a personal connection to not only the 9/11 attacks, but specifically to Flight 93. Those 40 were heroes and must never be forgotten. It was reinforced to me from a young age that I hold a great honor and an even bigger responsibility to ensure that this memorial is completed. I have done my part since I was very young, from donating Flight 93 flags to each school I attended to offering up my personal story of Flight 93 in class. United Flight 93 is a special story for many reasons. One key difference is that there was a delay in departure that morning of over 25 minutes. Also, there were only 4 hijackers, where the other 3 planes all had 5. The passengers and crew members were able to call home and learn that this was not a typical hijacking. It is truly amazing to me that these passengers and crew members who did not have any prior relationships with one another were able to create such a bond and come together to create a plan. Our understanding was that the plan was to regain control of the plane and land it safely. Although that did not happen, the fact that they were able to fight back and ensure that no one on the ground was impacted is a miracle. I am a recent college graduate who was fortunate enough to accept a job with Thompson Gas. As a member of our community involvement committee, I suggested we participate in the tree planting at the memorial for our Earth Day event this year. The tree planting was completed this year with a grand total of 150,000 seedlings planted in an effort to complete the reforestation project. I am honored to say that I was able to plant the very last tree. As I have gotten older, I have tried to find more ways to stay connected and involved with the memorial, and I will continue to share the legacy of Flight 93. The families have been fortunate enough to be loved and supported by the locals of Somerset County. Despite the tragedy of this day, we could not have asked for a better final resting place for our loved ones. Flight 93 is a very unique story, and throughout the years, the community has truly embraced both the honor and the responsibility to remember our 40 heroes. So now, I challenge all of you to think about how you will honor the sacrifices of our heroes. Thank you.
Mom, Dad, you should be proud. Beautiful job, Connie. Thank you. There are 2 very special places near the entrance to Flight 93 that we have had a very strong connection to. Patriot Park honors the more than 7,000 American service members who have given their lives in the global war on terror. The second, the Remember Me Rose Garden, is a beautiful living tribute to the heroes of Flight 93. These neighbors join our efforts to honor the passengers and crew members of Flight 93. It is a privilege for all of us at the memorial to work with these 2 very, very special organizations. Every year, we are helped with this commemoration by terrific and incredible volunteers from the Pennsylvania Mountain Service Corps of AmeriCorps, a federal agency which helps make service to others a cornerstone of our national culture. In addition, AmeriCorps was here within days of the crash, providing water and supplies to the crews on site. I would like to personally thank, and on behalf of all of us, the AmeriCorps volunteers who are with us here today, and all of those who have assisted in the past. Your service and commitment are greatly appreciated. now, I would like to introduce a musical performance by the choir of the Church of the Resurrection from Burtonsville, Maryland. The choir will provide a rendition of David Cantor's September Morning, a memorial anthem after 9/11, 2001. So let us pause and listen together to this powerful work written with devotion to the memory of all who died on that day.
In the sky over western Pennsylvania, an immense and beautiful bird flies. In her belly, a play of morality is beastily improvised. The play is finished, and from the land, a fine mist rises.
Transformed into night, and I
Thank you. Thank you very, very much for that moving performance. Nearly 20 years ago, on September 24th, 2002, President George W. Bush signed the act which created this national memorial. The National Park Service has been supported by several key partners in establishing and caring for this memorial. From the early days to the present, the Flight 93 Memorial Task Force, the families of Flight 93, the Flight 93 Advisory Commission, the Friends of Flight 93, and the National Park Foundation have worked to make this memorial what it is today, 21 years after September 11th. To all the members of those organizations, past and present, we offer our sincere gratitude for all that you have done to stand with us. The National Park Service administers more than 400 sites across this great nation to preserve these special places for the enjoyment, education, and inspiration of current and future generations. We are honored to be joined this morning by the Director of the National Park Service, Charles F. Sams III, along with his wife Lori and their daughter Ruby. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mrs. Sams. And thank you, little Ruby, for being with us today. I had the opportunity to spend some time with the Director and Ruby and Mrs. Sams, and boy, that Ruby is quite a special young lady. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome at this time the Secretary of the United States Department of the Interior, Deb Holland. She leads a department which includes the National Park Service and employs over 70,000 people whose mission it is to protect and manage this country's natural and cultural heritage. Please join me in welcoming Secretary Deb Holland.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Superintendent Clark. I'm very grateful and so honored to be here. And thank you to your amazing team, as always, for organizing such a fitting program to remember this somber day and honor the lives of American heroes. Director Sams, thank you so much for being here and for every single thing that you do. We're so grateful to have you on the Department of Interior team. And good morning, everyone. It's an honor to join you all, to the families of the passengers and crew members who were on that fateful flight. Today and every day, we grieve with you and your loss and honor the ultimate sacrifice of your loved ones. And I'm honored to be here with all of you. On this 21st day of remembrance, we think of those we lost on September 11th at the Twin Towers, in the Pentagon, and right here in this field where Flight 93 went down. We think of the 40 people who did everything they could to save our country from an even larger tragedy. It's a sacrifice for this country that many may not be able to comprehend. It's the sacrifice for generations to come. It's a profound notion that passengers and crew members on that flight put their lives in danger to ensure that others could live, I among those. That those survivors would see their families that evening, even though the 40 would never be able to hug their children or to see their parents again. May their sacrifices and yours be forever remembered. In the community I come from, sacrifices for future generations are part of who we are and part of how the people thrive. Everything we do centers on a belief that there are people who have not yet been born, but who will benefit from our actions while we are on this earth. In times of tragedy and of immense grief, it brings us peace to know that the troubles we experience and the challenges we face add to our collective memory and our experiences as Americans. We carry the strength of those who came before us every single day, and we honor their sacrifice in what they do for others. Though there are young people alive today who may not have been on this earth to remember the tragedy our country experienced on September 11th, 2001, it's up to us to make sure that they will read these hero stories and be grateful for their incredible courage. It's something we can all be grateful for. The park rangers who serve this national memorial are helping to steward and protect those stories every single day. It's part of the story of America. Their service honors those who perished on this hallowed ground, and I am immensely grateful to them for ensuring that we will never, ever forget them. Today and every day, we remember. And now I have the distinct honor of introducing someone who lives her values and demonstrates her empathy and compassion for others every single day. And that is our First Lady of the United States. I am honored to invite to the podium First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden.
Thank you, Secretary Holland. Deb, when you talk about your work, we can hear how much of your heart is in it. And Joe and I are so grateful for your leadership. Captain Brown, Commanding Officer of the USS Somerset, Director Sams, Superintendent Clark, Congressman Joyce, and all of the leaders here, thank you for welcoming us today. And I must say to Ginny and to Connie, your words were so beautiful, and I'm sure that they offered a lot of comfort to the families. Also with us is Keturah Johnson, International Vice President of the Association of Flight Attendants. I know that the last few years have been challenging for your members, facing unkind and even violent passengers. But to those flight attendants, I want you to know that Americans see your dedication, and we are grateful for it. Keturah, thank you for your leadership of the AFA. With the prayer and the choir, this has been such a beautiful and meaningful remembrance. Most of all, I want to thank the families of the crew and passengers of Flight 93 for sharing your love and memories of today. And I'm deeply honored to be here with you all. When we remember the events of this day 21 years ago, certain images are seared into our collective memory. Yet, even as we shared our grief, that moment affected us all in unique ways. Looking back, we remember the details like a slide under a microscope, the private memories that draw a deep, definite line between before and after. For me, as the shock settled into sorrow, after I talked with Joe and my children, I thought of my sister Bonnie, who is with me today. She was and continues to be a flight attendant with United Airlines. It's a job that she's loved for many years, and I knew that the weight of this tragedy would be heavier for her. When I got to her house, I realized that I was right. She hadn't just lost colleagues, she had lost friends. But I know that as we learned more about that dark day, she felt pride for what happened here as well. Pride that it was her fellow flight attendants and the passengers of United Flight 93 who fought back, who helped stop the plane from taking an untold number of lives in our nation's capital. You all have stories too, of that moment, of that day, of how its legacy has rippled through your lives. You have stories of loss, of last phone calls and waiting for news that you didn't want to receive, of hands that you will never hold again, and voices that you only long to hear. You have stories of pride, of the heroes who stood up to terror despite the danger, of the Shanksville Volunteer Fire Company who first answered a call they couldn't have prepared for and continued that work day in and day out, of a generation of women and men who put on our nation's uniform and became a part of something bigger than themselves and the families who served alongside them. You have stories of hope, of the humanity that shined through the inhumanity of that day, of the generosity of all the people here in Somerset County who donated what they could to state and federal law enforcement and welcome mourners with care and consideration to their hometown, of the love that lives beyond grief, that is undimmed by the passing of time. 9/11 touched us all. It changed us all. But it reminds us that with courage and kindness, we can be a light in that darkness. It showed us that we are all connected to one another. So as we stand on this sacred and scarred earth, a record of our collective grief and a monument to the memories that live on in us each day, this is the legacy we must carry forward. Hope that defies hate. Love that defies loss. And the ties that hold us together through it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam First Lady. You're welcome. Beautiful. Bonnie, again, thank you for being here. We must always remember what happened 21 years ago today, when an attack on our nation brought forth an inspiring show of courage from the 40 passengers and crew members aboard Flight 93. Confronted by that unprecedented situation, they drew upon reserves of inner strength, acted, and saved lives. As time goes by, this passage of time will indeed strengthen the importance of their story and this place in our nation's history. Let us never forget what they did here, and let us always remember the lives lost in New York, at the Pentagon, and again here on this field of honor. As I mentioned earlier, of the sacred sites cared for by the Park Service are some of the most historic places. This hallowed ground next to us, the resting place of the 40 heroes of Flight 93, is just such a place. It is one of the most important sites in our country, a place where brave men and women made history and shaped the future. When the events of September 11th have passed from living memory, this memorial, created through the tireless efforts of so many, will allow future generations to learn the inspiring story of Flight 93. I normally don't go off script, if you would, because every word from this podium is so important. But I would like to add to something that the Secretary mentioned. You know, typically, I don't mention the men and women of the National Park Service because they're doing their jobs. We have rangers as far away as Sleeping Bear Dunes, Cape Hatteras, Shenandoah. We have maintenance men and women coming to help us for this memorial service from Gettysburg, Delaware Water Gap, and too many parks to mention. Secretary, thank you for acknowledging these incredible men and women who make this event possible. In closing, alongside this field of honor, we remember the 40 heroes whose names are inscribed on this marble wall. To those around the world, to everyone here today, and to our cherished family members, thank you once again on behalf of our partnership for joining us all in the commemoration of this 21st observance.